Welcome to the Wheels of Service podcast, where every turn tells a story. I am your host, Bwanaheri, and together we will explore the people, passion, and purpose behind Rotary and Rotaract. From local impact to global change, we will hear the journeys of service, leadership, and the power of community, all in one space. Get ready for the inspiring conversations, untold stories, and the real voices from the heart of Rotary. This is the Wheels of Service podcast. Today we are going to delve deep into the history of Rotaract in Africa and specifically Uganda to see how far we've come and where we've been with this wonderful organization. With me is the past district Rotaract representative, now Rotarian, Edgar Nsereko, who is going to be sharing his experience and also tell us more about how far we've come in this country so that we can be able to appreciate the journey that we have undertaken as Rotaract in Uganda and of course in the world. Rotarian Edgar, you're most welcome. I'm happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah.
It's a big honor, and you know that Rotary is something that I've always held in high esteem. So for me to share my knowledge with friends that are listening in is a big honor for me. So thank you for the opportunity.
I should thank you for accepting the invite. I remember you're one of the big boys by the time I joined Rotaract when I started visiting in 2013.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I think you were either DRR or you became DRR in 2014.
I had three portfolios that I served in 2013.
Yeah.
At the time, I was still a Rotaractor.
Yeah.
And I served as DRRE and country chair for Rotaract Uganda, as well as Raila chair. Raila chair was just before I became country chair, but still in 2013.
Now I think when I joined you were country chair because then there was Kalonji, Winnie.
Yes,
Winnie was the district. Yes,
he was the DRR then. Yes.
Oh wow, we have moved quite a while because now that makes it 10 years since I've been in Rotary and Rotaract.
how time flies.
Yeah, it's so fast. You know, very many people don't know where this organization has come. There is no specific history when it comes to Rotaract in Africa and Uganda. But before we delve into that, because that's going to be our main discussion, tell us a bit about yourself.
So Edgar Nsereko is an Interact alumni. I was an Interactor in 201 up to 203. Yeah, at Kaboja. Now it's Kaboja International School. At the time, it was still called Kaboja Secondary School. And so I had 3 years as a stunt as an Interactor. So that was my first entry and a feel of what Rotary was about. So later on, I joined Rotaract in 2007. And I joined the Rotaract Club of Ruvaga, where I was a member up to and when I left Rotaract. I think I spent about 10 years as a Rotaractor. Of course, over time, I had also different leadership positions that I served in from club level up to the district level. And then later on, I joined Rotary Club of Kyambogo in 2016. And I had also a beautiful 5 years in Rotary Club of Kyambogo. And currently, I transferred to the Rotary Club of Kampala, where I've been a member for now 2 years. Yeah, so that is my brief Rotary journey.
You mentioned transferring from Kyambogo. Why? What happened?
So it boiled down to convenience. Kyambogo meeting time is 6:30 to 7:30, and their meeting point is in Chireka. So there was always traffic that would always inconvenience me. By the time I would get to the fellowship time, it would be done, since fellowship was always 1 hour. So I had to look for a club which would be convenient for me in terms of having a physical fellowship. Incidentally, I've been a past president in Rotary Club of Chambogo. I was among the COVID presidents, as we were called.
I don't. Oh, wow!
So we were most of, I think, 80% of our meeting time was always online because they couldn't allow fellowship.
Oh.
So after we resumed the normal life, many things changed, and part of it was my timing for work as well.
Yeah.
So the drastic change for me to leave Chambogo to join Kampala happened.
Oh.
Yeah.
I actually did notice that you were president of the Rotary Club of Chambogo.
I was president 2020, 2021.
That is how bad COVID was.
Yes.
Like, some things will happen and people would never know what happened. Wow. All right. Okay. That's nice. Now, delving into the topic of the day, the history of Rotaract in Uganda and Africa as a whole. Where do we start from?
So I think Africa was blessed. And why do I say so? The year when Rotaract was being started in the world in 1968, the first club in Africa was also chartered in that very year. So the first club in Africa, which is the Rotaract Club of Durban in South Africa, had the privilege to start in the very first year when Rotaract was starting as well, world over.
1968.
1968. So we were privileged as Africans because Durban led the way. And so, because at the time South Africa had a very strong Rotary movement, so it was always very easy. Over time, I think in East Africa, we had, I think that was around 1964. 1970.
Yeah.
We had the Rotaract Club of Mombasa, the first club in East Africa to be chartered. So it was chartered. So that's how now Rotaract entered East Africa. At the time, I think it was still dominated by Asian community.
Yeah.
And I think majority of the Rotaractors from Mombasa were still Asian dominated up until 1977, when the Rotary Club of Nairobi chartered the first predominantly Black African race Rotaractors. Yeah, and that's the Rotaract Club of Nairobi Central. So if you could say that in the East African region, Kenya had the go first because of the experience and the time that had Rotary over time. And even when you look on the Rotary side, the Rotary Club of Nairobi was the first club in East Africa to be chartered in 1930. So they had over time gotten a lot of experience, and for them, the Rotary movement was really in high gear compared to other parts of East Africa. So those two clubs, Mombasa and Nairobi Central, led the way for Rotaract in the East African region. So drawing this to Uganda took time. Why? Because first of all, Rotary took long to start in Uganda, whereas in Kenya it started in 1930. In Uganda it started in 1957.
Oh,
yes.
What would be the reason?
The modus operandi at the time was that they would go through the mayors of the city to start Rotary clubs. And I think for a while, the mayors in Uganda were not really picking the idea in between them. It's only in 1957 that the mayor then, it could have been, I can't remember the name properly, but it was an Indian mayor that picked it up and started a club in Uganda in 1957. And so that led the way for Rotary in Uganda. And for Rotaract, it took a whole while before the first club was chartered, because the Rotary Club of Kampala, which was the first Rotary club in Uganda, first made an attempt to charter a club in 1984.
Yeah.
And that was the Rotaract Club of Chambogo Polytechnic.
Okay.
And things moved smoothly, but because of the war of 1986, the club had a lot of challenges in terms of members meeting and also having their movement going forward. So the club actually fell backwards and collapsed. And so when it collapsed, Rotaract suffered for almost 2 years, that whole period when we had war, 1985, 86, And so in 1987, Uganda had a little bit stabilized because now there was a new government in place. And so the Rotary Club of Kampala made an attempt to start 2 new clubs. And they started the Rotaract Club of Mulago and the Rotaract Club of Makerere University. Now, Mulago went on high speed because they had, graduate doctors that had been members. They also had studying medical students that were also members. So it got chartered a little bit earlier compared to Makerere. It moved faster. And so in 1986, the Rotaract Club of Mulago was chartered. So it was the first club in now what you call current history, because the Chambogo Polytechnic no longer exists.
Yes.
So now it's Mulago that we count as the first club. Yes. Yes. Though when you talk about the history of Rotaract in Uganda, you can't, rub away the fact of Polytechnic as well. So Mulago walked the first journey. Makerere took a while. It was active. It had members. They had presidents, but they had not yet gotten their charter. They actually got their charter in 1988.
That's 2 years later.
That's 2 years after Mulago had gotten its charter. But they had members.
Yeah.
And some of the members are actually current Rotarians. Current Rotarians. One of them that I can trace is Fred Masade, who was president before the club was chartered, but was president in the period of 1987-88, just before the club was chartered. Yes, he was the immediate president before the club was chartered. Those days, the charter would actually take long. It wasn't an easy. So sometimes it would work, sometimes it would take long. So it depended on the administration of RI at the time. But thankfully, Makerere came through, and it came through at a time when Rotary in Uganda was growing tremendously. Because at the time when Makerere was chartered, the late past Rotary president-elect Sam Owori was district governor in our district, and he had spearheaded, I think, about 9 more new clubs as district governor. And he also took a model which I think Rotary took when we were starting in Africa, the model of going through mayors and district leaders. So for every prominent district that was in Uganda, Mbarara, Masaka, Gulu, he started a club there, using the prominent people of the town and the administrative leaders of the town. So Rotary at the time grew to 700 new members, you can imagine, including the Rotaract Club of Makerere University. And so once Makerere University was chartered, of course there were some members that are now, were due to leave the university, had graduated, and they wanted to continue the journey of Rotaract. And 2 more clubs were chartered in 1989, and that was the Rotaract Club of Kampala City. And in the beginning, I think it must have been January or February of 1990, also Kololo, Rotaract Club of Kololo also came up and was chartered at the time. All the past members were coming from the Rotaract Club of Makerere University.
Okay.
So there was a big influence by Rotaract Club of Makerere University to become the feeder and the growth of Rotaract as it is in Uganda.
For the benefit of someone who doesn't know, when you say they were new, you're saying they moved from Makerere to another Rotaract club like Kololo and Kampala City. You don't tell them the difference between institutional-based club and based club.
Right. So Rotaract takes a twofold membership. There are institutional-based clubs and there are community-based clubs. The age cap still remains the same for both, between 18 to 30. However, for institutional-based clubs, it's predominantly students of an institution. Say, for example, Makerere University or Kampala University or Chambogo University. So there was the Rotaract Club of Makerere University predominantly, and from time immemorial has always had students as members. And so it's a student-based club. And then the community-based club has people between the ages of 18 to 30, but they're within that specific community. They're members of that community, or they have a contribution to that community. And so you'd find when students of Makerere University and the Rotaractors at the same time that left the university, they could not fit into the club. So they had to look for a community-based club. And that's how Kampala City and Kololo came about, because the first members of those two clubs came from Makerere University as past Rotaractors of Makerere University Rotaract.
You talked about being members of a given community.
Yes.
Was that just a strategy to recruit members of a given community, or is it still operational right now that if I stay in Munyonyo, I have to belong to a club in Munyonyo, or now I can stay in Munyonyo but belong to a club in Kampala City?
Mm. So over time, Rotary has evolved. At the time, the focus was that you had to be at a certain community for you to belong to that club, because Rotary focused on growing that particular community with members from that community. And it made sense at that time for members to come from a particular community and be part of a Rotary or Rotaract club in that community. But over time, times have flipped up, times have changed, and technology has come in. So many things have come into play. Now you can be a member in a Rotary club, let's say Ohio in USA. But you're in Uganda. But you join through, online meeting and still be participatory. Maybe you contribute for projects and all that. So the membership trend has actually now changed. Yeah. It no longer restricts people to be just only people that come from that particular community, but they can be diverse across the world. Yes. All right. So you can come from any other part of Uganda and get another, a club that is in a completely opposite part of Uganda as a member in that club.
That's amazing. Looking at the rich history of Rotaract in Uganda, how far we've come since 1986, where do we stand now with the numbers of Rotaract club?
So it's amazing how Rotaract has grown over time in Uganda, from just 1 or 2 clubs to now, I think, over 200 clubs in Uganda. But it has been a work in progress, because as many people may know, there's always new leadership every Rotary year. Yeah. And every new leadership that comes onto the fold has something to contribute and build on what has been built before. So Uganda has been, if not, I think maybe together with Nigeria, is the two most growing, in terms of membership, the most growing countries in terms of Rotary membership and Rotaract membership. Yeah. And that has been because of what people have seen Rotary do. I would want to think so. Well, what they've seen Rotary do within their communities. Rotaract, if I may just narrow it down to Rotaract, by the time I joined, I think we're about 40 clubs. That was 2007. 40 clubs in Uganda. And it was such a small community that you would visit almost those 40 clubs within 2 weeks. Yeah. And you knew each and every one that was every member in whichever club. Yes. Now it's not the same case. You actually will be shocked to know that for every club you go to, however much you visit it, you will find a new face. That's how much Rotaract has grown. Yeah. To take you back in 2007, because I'm very acquainted with that particular time. We had a very small community at the time, but the bond was so strong. I'll shock you, we never had social media as a form of communication.
Yes.
So the only way you would get to know what is happening in other clubs or where you should be visiting was, we had what we call the Rotaract mail, which had every Rotaractor as part of it.
Yes.
So at the time, we never had phones. Yeah. So the only thing was for us to look for a website cafe every day, check what's on the Rotaract mail, and then get the gist of what's happening in other clubs or where you should be visiting, which guest speaker is going to be where. And that became the only mode of communication for Rotaract at the time. to now where there's now social media, WhatsApp, things come instantly.
Flyers are running.
Everyone has a phone. Yeah. So over time, I think now communication has actually made communication within Rotaract space so seamless and simple and easy to reach.
Yeah.
So I think that also explains the growth as well.
Yeah.
Because there the community was able to see and our stories were able to be told. The time when I joined, the only forum for telling the story was newspaper.
How easy was it to get a newspaper write about?
It was not easy. First of all, it was very expensive at the time because they were it was the only source of information for the country.
Yes.
So competing with other sectors, government, private sector, for spaces in that newspaper was always very hard. And so for Rotary or Rotaract, we would always get like a small, if you manage to get space, it would be a small corner somewhere in the newspaper. Perhaps maybe not so many people would read about it. Once in a while, we had columnists that were Rotarians, so once in a while they would put in something about Rotary and use their space in the newspaper to write about Rotary. So communication and sharing information about Rotary at the time was really hard. Really, really hard.
Right. When I joined 2014, 2013, Rotaract and Rotary, Uganda were part of District 9211. And we had Uganda and Tanzania.
Yes.
Tell us about that history from 2007.
Okay. So I'll even actually go beyond that. So Rotaract, to the best of my knowledge, had the leadership of the district Rotaract representative portfolio. I think first came up in 1987. I think there was a DRR that came from Seychelles. At the time, the district was called 920.
What year is that?
In 1987.
1987.
Yes. 920. And that's the time when the late Samori was district governor as well. So Rotary had a composition, that 920 district had a composition of Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Comoros, Seychelles, Mauritius. Yes, those are the countries that form the district. And it was always very hard for the district Rotaract representative to move around because you had to move around in different countries. There was a cost attached to it.
Yeah.
And so for all the DRRs at the time that moved, I think the district 920 moved on up to 1995. So Uganda had the privilege of having two DRRs in that district. One was the late Bwanaheri, who was DRR in 1990, 1991. And then the other is a member of my Rotary Club, is still alive. He's a past president. He's called, the name has skipped my head, but he's a member of my Rotary Club. He's still available. And one of the things they keep sharing is that it was always very costly to be there because there was never a budget for Rotaract, either at the district level or even from RI. So you had to put from your own pockets. So 1995-96, we had a new district, which was District 9200. And by the time I joined Rotaract, that's the district I owned. That district had 5 countries: Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. So that district continued up to 2012-2013 was the last year for that district, 2012-2013. And I was privileged to be an ADRR in that district. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I remember traveling to Ethiopia together with the DRR to visit the clubs in Ethiopia and seeing how Rotaract was evolving. But one of the things that fascinated me was that each country had its own uniqueness. Ugandan clubs at the time in District 9200 were very strong in fundraising, having fundraising activities, such as, put up a fundraising activity and raise money for a project, car wash, bowling challenge, beach volleyball, and so on and so forth. Ethiopia was good at getting money from partners. they had a strong sense of what you call respect from the corporate world and also the NGO world in Ethiopia. So you'd find one club with about 12 members, just only 12 members, getting $40,000 for a project.
Wow.
So that was their strength. Kenya was strong in a sense of togetherness. Let's do a harambe. We need to raise this money. Which friends can we approach? Which governors can we approach? That was their strength. Tanzania at the time was struggling in terms of Rotaract. Tanzania took a while. I think Rotaract started growing immensely, mostly when we switched to District 9211. That's when now Tanzania started taking a step forward. Eritrea, because of the civil wars, there was no business there really for Rotaract. So come to 2013-14, we had District 9211, Tanzania and Uganda. And so there was a deliberate effort from the Rotarians and Rotaractors in Uganda to make sure that they pull our Tanzanian brothers up. And at the time I was DRRE, I think Tanzania had about 13 clubs, 9 to 13 clubs. By the time I was DRR, we raised the number to 23. Now I think Tanzania currently could be having about over 40 clubs. Yes, so it's been a growth trajectory for Rotaract in the district.
Yeah. Talking about these districts and redistrict, what causes that? Or why after some time we say, okay, now we're moved from this district, now we're this district, and what does the district actually mean?
Right. So Rotary has a structure. Rotary International has a structure. It has a structure at the top where you find the president, Rotary International president, with the board. Yeah. And that is the highest governance structure in Rotary. And then there's also the Rotary trustees who manage the finances that are collected all throughout Rotary for projects. So they're the ones that allocate money on behalf of Rotary International to do projects, to run the projects that are under Rotary. So besides that structure, you start from the club level where you find a Rotary club, and each Rotary club has a president. And then from the Rotary club, you go up and find a district.
Yeah.
So a district will be a composition of various clubs, Rotary clubs, within the nearby locality, the same geographical location. Because of administrative issues, they prefer usually the same geographical location. And so the maximum number for a district should be 1,500. Many times the number shoots up beyond 1,500, but that's the bare minimum a district should have, 1,500. So a district can be of more than 10 clubs, but as long as the number is above 1,500. To relate to our district, 9211 at the time when you joined, I think by the time you joined 2013, we had about 3,000 Rotarians, over 3,000. So that meant that the district was ripe to move on to make another district. Why is that done? So you find the district governor, who is usually the head of the district and a Rotarian, has to visit different clubs. Now, most times where you have a district that has over and above 4,000 Rotarians, you find that that district has over 100 clubs. And that becomes an administrative constraint for the district governor to do the daily visits for each one of those clubs. Yeah? So most times Rotary International will make another district to make it more compatible and more easy for a district governor to govern. Yes. So to explain to you, the district usually is a composition of different Rotary clubs and Rotary clubs, which is headed by the Rotary district governor. And then beyond that, there's what they call the zone. Now the zone has a multi-facets of different districts. I'll give an example of Zone 22, which is comprised of all countries in Africa. And within Africa, there are about 9 or 10 districts. Yes.
Okay. How did we gain traction in the early days of Rotaract? Like, how did we attract members and people were like, okay, I need to join Rotaract because of this and that? How did you do it?
So the membership attraction in Rotary is usually through invitation. We are strong believers that we do not recruit, but we invite people we feel that represent what Rotary should be about.
Yeah.
And they're the basic, usually the criteria focuses on the basics.
Yeah.
Are you a professional? Are you an outstanding business person in the community? Are you an outstanding person in the community itself that you may be coming from? Then if you meet any one of those three, then the next thing is, are you a trustworthy person? Because that is important as well. So to answer your question, many people were invited to join Rotary. So it's more of invitation. And so because there are so many spaces to have these invitations done at your workplace, your neighborhood, your family, potential people that you've seen from afar. So there was a deliberate effort at the time by the Rotarians between the years of 2007 to 2015 to grow Rotary in Uganda.
Yeah.
Most specifically with the district governors. So the biggest message for the district governors then was to encourage Rotarians to invite their friends and share the good benefits that they've enjoyed in Rotary so that their friends could also enjoy the same benefits. And so there was a deliberate effort from every Rotarian to invite someone. And that's how the numbers over time have grown to where we are right now.
Okay. Have we faced any specific challenges in the early years mostly of Rotaract?
Yes. In the early years, like I mentioned earlier, it was very hard to share our story because of the communication channels. And even when the new communication channels came up, we were still complacent in sharing our stories. And so many people would be in a community and they would not even know that there's a Rotaract club in that community. And why? Because perhaps maybe we would do so many projects, but the community would not even get to know that there are projects running or this is done by Rotary. For them, they would think, Rotary is something for the rich, or those are just people who don't have anything to use their money for, so they're just passing time.
Yeah.
But over time, as we shared our story, people have come to appreciate the good work and understand why they should also be part of the Rotary journey.
Yeah, there has always been a problem with differentiation for the general public.
Yes.
They have always failed. Even when Rotaractors go and do a project, they will say, Rotarian, about Rotary.
Yeah.
Yeah, how was it during that time?
I'll put it this way. Because times have been changing, there's new things that Rotary had not adapted at the time.
Yeah.
One of them was branding. Yeah. So branding was always a big issue for Rotary, in a sense that, and also Rotaract, in a sense that people, first of all, did understand what Rotary is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone had their own perception. Maybe it's a cult, or maybe those are rich men that have so much money, or it's an exclusive club. So all those were gaps that the brand was known, but people did not know exactly what it was about. And so Rotary International decided to become deliberate to actually modify the communication channels and also build on their brand. And whereas for Rotary, it caught up very fast. People started knowing what Rotary was doing, and exactly for Rotaract, it took a while because Rotaract also has fun. And I think the fun overshadowed the service projects. So someone would say, I know about Rotary, but I don't know about Rotaract. Or Rotaract is about friends that catch up on fellowship or go to have a drink together and all that. So all those were gaps that, because of the brand that was never prioritized at the time. So over time, I think that has addressed the gap of now people getting to know
what's Rotaract is
yes,
and what
yes,
they do. Now, during your time, all the early years of Rotaract, what do you remember to be one of the biggest projects? Because when I joined, we had zebra crossing projects and all. What was the biggest undertaking that Rotaract in Uganda took on as a project?
So there were, I think, predominantly at the time when I was at the Rotaract leadership, predominantly we had mostly medical outreaches. Why? Because Rotaract at the time could not get grants and so could not run big projects.
Yeah.
So they could only run small projects within their reach. And those that really stood out were usually medical outreaches, in areas of need, Masaka, Kabale, those areas of need really. And so there was not, I would say there were projects, yes, but there was no standout project like the way you see Cancer Run.
Yeah.
So until I think about 2014, when I was DRR, and together with the presidents at the time, decided to come up with a continuous program, which would run over time, and that was RAY, Rotaract Initiative.
Yes.
So that was launched that year, and part of the things that I did was to endeavor that I made it be adapted by the district so that it could be supported as other clubs, so that all the other clubs in the district could have a buy-in. So it started as a president's project. The presidents of that Rotary year when I was DRR,
which I was part.
Yes.
This is at 14-15.
Yes, and then we now made sure that we made it to have so that the clubs have a buy-in and becomes like a Rotaract project. Yes. And so I think over time, it's one of the projects that has really stood out. Yeah. That notwithstanding, Rotaract also does projects jointly with Rotary. So when you hear of the Cancer Run, building the cancer ward in Zambia, the blood bank, Rotaract has its footprint on it as well, a big footprint on it because they also fundraise.
Yeah.
But now, lately, Rotaract has been elevated, as you may know.
Yeah.
Ever since they were elevated, so then they can now get grants.
Yeah.
And now I know a few clubs that are now getting grants as a Rotaract clubs.
And they're taking really big projects.
Yes, to do now big projects, right? Yeah.
Because now I've seen the Rotaract Club of Kampala North. They have a huge project, I think in Mityana or something like that. Yeah, I remember seeing projects by the Rotaract Club of Kololo.
Even my club has a joint grant that we're doing with the Rotaract Club of Kampala City. It's called Bake for Life.
Yeah,
skilling young youthful girls on how to have the skills of baking, and then later on you're also giving them a starting capital to start and have a meaningful life.
Okay, looking back, how has Rotaract in Uganda contributed to the overall development of our young people and leaders? I want to use you as an example because I remember, is it last election or before last election, you also 2016 you vying for a position in Parliament? Yes.
I think the biggest benefit, because people ask, what do you benefit from being a Rotarian or a Rotaractor?
Yeah.
And the biggest benefit that we get is the leadership skills that we acquire while we're in this community. Rotary has one of the best training manuals and also systems for leaders.
Yeah.
You don't jump out of nowhere to become a leader. You're groomed. I'm sure you'll be a witness to that.
Yeah.
That for the time someone becomes a president, they should have gone through the phase of being PE. And even when being PE, there's a phase of both being trained at the club level
and the
district level.
Yes.
So by the time you take the mantle, you know exactly what you're going to be doing. Not so many organizations have that leadership training and grooming. And so for me, that has been the biggest beneficiary for us as Rotarians and Rotaractors. We get it for free. because some of these trainings, if you look into serious training institutes, you'd pay so much money to have such kind of training.
Trainings, yeah, true.
And for me personally, if I may just speak about myself, so many things that I learned while I was at the Rotaract level. I had an experience of being a treasurer, club treasurer, so I knew how to handle systems, financial systems.
Yeah.
By the time I started my own company, I knew exactly what to do. And that is something that I benefited from as a person from Rotaract. When I was president, leading volunteers is the toughest thing that you can go through.
I can attest to that.
Because you don't pay any one of them a salary, but you have to lead them and you have to do the job that you're sent out to do. And while you learn on the job to lead volunteers, it grooms you to lead even now where people are going to be paid.
Yeah.
So by the time you become a CEO, an MD or a manager, you've gotten first-hand training. Free of charge, super skills, and how to handle people, and you have different tempers and different characters, and you have to handle them. You have to guide them. You have to supervise them without any motivation that you're giving to them. And that for me is something that is priceless that we get from Rotary leadership. Yes.
All right. Speaking about leadership, how has the leadership structure grown in Rotaract, both in Africa and bring it down to Uganda? How have things changed? How has it been over years? Elections, choosing our leaders, district representative, and all that.
Rotaract. I'll stick to Rotaract.
Yeah.
I am not sure how leadership was being got before 2007. So I can only speak from 2007 when I joined, when I have an idea. But I think at the time, it was more of voting by the delegates. So each club that was in good standing had a chance of having a voting delegate at the assembly. And at the district assembly, they would now vote for the topmost office, which was DRR. So you'd have a collection of voting delegates at the assembly, and they would vote for their leader. Before that, you would have clubs nominate.
Yeah.
For example, my club nominated me to be DRR.
Yeah.
There was always a criteria to meet for a club. One of it was that the decision had to be ratified by the club assembly, and then the club secretary officially wrote, or club president officially wrote to the district secretary, communicating their position to nominate a candidate from their club, to have a position, nominate a candidate from their club. Now that nomination had to be seconded by two clubs also in good standing.
Yeah. In
good standing, I mean they should have paid district dues and all that. And then the rest was left for the assembly. Assembly meaning the voting delegates to decide whether or not there were more than 10 candidates or one candidate. Even if it was one candidate, the assembly had to still vote for that candidate. Should the assembly fail to have voted for the candidate, it means there was a vacuum, and then they would now open up another modus of operandi of, like, since this person has failed to be voted into office, then can we open up so that we do not have a vacuum? Because Rotary is not you're not supposed to have a vacuum in any case. But should at any one time a vacuum fails to be evacuated, the person who's serving as DR would continue for the second year.
That is the only that someone...
Yes. Even in clubs, when the president when the club fails to have a PE, either one of the past presidents or the current serving president will continue serving.
That is something I'm learning.
Yes. Over time, because there were always challenges of voting for DRR, it was turning into a political scene where people would campaign, and those are things that, Rotary does not stand for. Non-political, non-violent, non-religious, So we thought it was actually now going out of hand. So we decided to take it in a route of how RI does it, have a nominating committee, and then the nominating committee can actually do the actual voting. Yes.
Right.
So I think that's what it is for the current 2 districts within Uganda. Yes.
Do you find it effective?
I think it has been effective because we've never had challenges again as they were in the time. Because at the time, every after an assembly and someone has been voted, the losing party would take it really hard.
Yeah.
Because they would see that this club voted for this one, this club voted for this one, these guys did not vote. And so it was always taken in bad faith.
Yeah.
Where I would call it the white smoke, like the way the Catholic calls it.
Yeah.
You take it in a sense of let the committee handle from a private area and then give a name that has come out that has been victorious among the people that have stood. I think at this particular time, those issues are no longer coming up.
Oh,
yes.
that's amazing. All right. I have heard, just like very many Rotaractors, of this thing called dual membership. When did it start and why did it actually come about? And that someone can be both a Rotaractor and a Rotarian at the same time.
Okay, so when Rotaract was elevated, I think that was 2019, 2020. Rotaract was elevated as an equal partner to Rotary.
Yes.
So because they elevated Rotaract, it meant that anything a Rotarian can do, a Rotaract can do. Every benefit that Rotarian would get, a Rotaract would also benefit. One of them is having an RI number and also paying RI dues. So, and then 2, Rotary also had a challenge of growing membership in other parts of the world. And one way of solving that problem was, how do we entice Rotaractors to join Rotary? Because I think there was a big gap for many countries. You find there's always a big gap between Rotaractors and Rotarians. So one way was, let's invite the Rotaractors to be members, joint members, both in Rotary as a Rotaractor, but also a Rotarian at the same time. And also a Rotarian can be a Rotarian and a Rotaractor at the same time, so that we can match that gap that had widened over time. Yes, so that's how that came about.
So when someone is a dual member or Rotaractor, do they pay dues in Rotary too, or?
So you choose, especially when you're at the Rotaract level. You're not supposed to pay double membership at RI.
Yes.
So you choose which membership you're going to pay at RI. You can choose to pay the one for Rotarian or the one for the Rotaractor. But you can be a member in both clubs, because at your status at RI level, it will show that you're both a Rotarian and a Rotaractor and the clubs that you're in. And so there's that exemption. Rotary became flexible. They decided to make flexible so that we could have these new adaptations that are coming in become easy for people to transit and join the ranks in Rotary.
All right. What are some of the things? What are your thoughts on Rotaract in Uganda currently? What do you see as the opportunities that we stand to get as Rotaractors, or the challenges that you foresee in the near future in Rotaract?
Challenges, I would say one of them is that the growth trajectory has been so fast.
Yeah.
So you'd find in small communities having a Rotaract club, but sometimes those communities may not have the capacity to have proper membership.
Yeah.
Almost now every corner of Uganda has a Rotary and a Rotaract club.
Yes.
And many clubs, especially up country, struggle with membership. So I think the growth has been good, but it has come with challenges, and that's one of the membership, especially for the community, for the up country clubs.
Yeah.
The other is the quality of membership also is compromised, because there's been every club wants to have big membership. So sometimes they have lessened the criteria of who should be a member, who is good enough to be a member.
Yeah.
And so because of that compromise, you always have a few bad characters that also come in, and perhaps maybe the image can be affected because of those few bad people. And that has also been a challenge as well. Yes. Mm.
What has happened in your life as a Rotaractor that has left the biggest impression on you ever since?
Personally, I'll share my personal experience. So when I was a Rotaract leader, two things. One, I was given a big responsibility of being Raila chair. That's one of the Rotary trainings where we had, at the time, we would have over 500 or 400 people going to be trained under the Rotary program. So I was given that huge responsibility to be the chair and oversee. At the time, it was Raila was going to be Masaka.
Raila is Rotary
Youth Leadership Awards. Yes. And so we had over 500 youth that were trained for 4 days in Masaka. That for me was my first big experience as a leader, as a young leader. The second one on a personal level is the friends that I've made that made me look at life in a different perspective. When I was DRR, when I had gone to visit clubs in Tanzania, my district secretary, Rotary district secretary, Jayesh Asha, at the time, who is now a PDG, invited me to his home in Tanga, and he invited his whole entire extended family to come and meet a VIP. I had dinner with them. I had good conversations with them.
Yeah.
He took me to he has an industry, a cosmetic industry in Tanga. So he took me, and they were waiting for me as like a president. There's the CEO, the marketing manager. They're all waiting for the big dignitary to take me around the industry. And that for me inspired me, because these are people that are way better than me in terms of life, achievements. And but they were humble enough to recognize that I was also their leader as well. And for me, it gave me a new perspective of leadership. Being humble and being obedient and keeping your foot on the ground.
That's good. How did your experience with Rotaract shape your professional journey?
Professionally, I'm a lawyer and an advocate of High Court. And my first clients that I got as a lawyer were Rotarians. And over time, I had a big clientele from that pool, because they knew exactly what I was doing and I'd done my job very well.
Yeah.
So it is something that helped me greatly. So for me, Rotary was one of the networks that really benefited my career. Even when I'm now going into business, I still have some Rotary work that I do as part of my business. So that has also made me grow as a person and also get more friendships within the circle, because sometimes it's not just about getting work, but also the networks that can help you reach a certain level in life.
Yeah.
Yes. So that has been a good network for me as a person to grow.
They say your network is your net worth.
Right.
I think it applies perfectly when it comes to Rotary. All right. Thank you so much, Rotarian Edgar. As we come to the end of this podcast episode, I wanted to you as a leader, past leader of Rotaract, and now the incoming district youth service chair for districts 9 to 13. What are your parting shots to would-be Rotaractors, someone who wants to become a Rotaractor, has an interest in becoming a Rotaractor, and also the current leaders in Rotaract?
My parting shots to would-be leaders or Rotaractors is that Rotaract is not a place for pretenders. So utilize your time very well. Grow. There are so many aspects of growth in Rotaract. One of them being leadership, the other being focus. So utilize the time very efficiently. Sometimes I've seen a few friends that have not benefited because of how they've utilized their time within the space, and others have actually surpassed their levels or the expectations of what they thought they would benefit from. So let them be focused. Let them also allow to share what they have achieved, so that other people can benefit equally like they have benefited as well. But in the end, also for the incoming leaders, the journey for Rotary continues. I am hoping that eventually they'll meet the 5th goal of Rotaract to join Rotary. So Rotaract is a phase, and at the end of that phase, you're supposed to join Rotary. Once you don't join, then that means there was something that missed out in that phase. And those are the goals of Rotaract. Building professional leadership skills. Did you attain that? Emphasize respect for the rights of others. Did you appreciate that? Up to when you were supposed to, the last goal of joining eventual membership in Rotary. Yes. So they need to take the goals seriously and understand that each one of them is a level that leads to the other.
All right. Thank you so much, Rotary and Edgar. It's been an honor and privilege to have you on this podcast. I am sure that our listeners are going to appreciate this knowledge that you've shared, because this is something most of us didn't know about as Rotaractors. Even I, with 10 years in Rotaract, I have not known this history. We appreciate your time and have the best of the rest of the year as the District Youth Service Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Wheels of Service podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Keep the wheel turning. Tell your story. Serve your world.